Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rochelle Davis. I'm an associate professor of anthropology here at Georgetown University, and I'm also the director of the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. And it's really an honor to have all of you here today for this book launch of The Lure of Authoritarianism, The Maghreb after the Arab Spring. And thank you so much for all of those of you who have been working so hard on writing your book chapters and are here today to share all of that with us. The book will be for sale later this morning and again this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the Moulay Hisham Foundation and Moulay Hisham for making all of this possible. We are really grateful to be working with you on this and to be producing academic knowledge about this topic at a time when it is needed. I'd also like to thank Stephen King and Hassan AlAmin for all the work that they have done on this. Here at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies, we're getting ready to celebrate our 45th anniversary of our founding. And it is events like this that really make us who we are, and your participation in them. And in the last month, we've had two really interesting panel discussions this room was overflowing on the Sudan and on Algeria. And we've had Sudanese American academics and activists speak. And then last night we had two Algerians speak about what is going on in Algeria. And so it's adding to all that we do, that this is a real opportunity to have you among us and to learn from you. I'm going to apologize because I have 5.5 hours of class today. Thursday is my teaching day, so I will be in and out, but because it's so long, I will mostly be out, but I'll go back in at some point. Before I turn it over to our dean to speak, I'd like to thank our CCAS staff for all of the work that they have done and the support that they've provided to get you here and to make all of this possible. And that is our assistant director, Dana Deirani, our events coordinator, Maddie Fisher, and our student assistant, Victoria Shakespeare, who have really been working many, many hours to make all this possible. So I would like to ask the Dean of the School of Foreign Service, Joel Holman, to open with a few words of welcome as well.
Thank you, Rochelle, and welcome you all here. It's really our pleasure to have you. When I heard that they were launching the book on this critical topic, I actually just wanted to come in and say a few words to put this in the context of what we here at Georgetown at the School of Foreign Service are trying to do at this critical moment. Rochelle mentioned that this is the 45th anniversary of the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies, not to denigrate that milestone, but it's also the 100th anniversary of the School of Foreign Service, which the Center for Contemporary Arab sits within. And as many of you are visitors and guests, I just wanted to give you briefly a background, because it fits so well with why we are so keen on hosting discussions like we're having here today. So the school itself was founded 100 years ago in the immediate aftermath of World War I. And it was founded by a group of people who, of course, were concerned about how to ensure that the great violence that the world had experienced, that by at that time, the greatest loss of life in a conflict, in fact, collectively, of all conflicts that had ever been experienced, there was more loss of life in World War I than all previous conflicts combined. So the thought was, in the aftermath of that violence, how do we begin to train a new foundation of leaders in the United States whose own role in the world was radically changing, militarily, economically, politically? How do we train a set of leaders that can help secure the peace? And indeed, peace and the building of peace, the foundation of that being a core commitment to human rights, even at that early stage in 1919, and a core commitment of democracy and the commitment to democracy were absolutely essential to building that. So for 100 years, those core values have been essential to the creation of this school and to everything this school has tried to do in its curriculum, in its engagement in the city of Washington, in its engagement in the policy dialogue. Now we celebrate our 100th year at a moment when the commitment to the core values that generated the school are perhaps at greater risk than we have ever seen, certainly in a generation, if not since the end of World War II. So we see this moment for us not only as a chance to celebrate our history, 45 years of the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies, 100 years of the School of Foreign Service. We see this as an opportunity, in fact, a critical moral responsibility to be able to frame the debate, to frame our understanding and analysis around the values that led to the creation of the school in the first place. And of course, democracy and the commitment to democracy, as I said, are central to that. There's one other thing about the history of that school that's critical for this discussion, is that the school from its very start always placed an extraordinary emphasis on cross-cultural understanding and empathy through understanding regions and cultures, and cross-cutting that with an understanding of core global issues. So language study, cultural study, multidisciplinary study was baked in to the curriculum of the school way back in 1919 and has since been a core principle by which the school has been organized. We have core study centers on all the regions of the world. We've built up world-class master's degrees in those programs. And although the commitment to area studies or regional studies has actually been waning in American academia, our commitment to it has remained solid and stable and a core of who we are, because we believe that in order to really understand the core issues that are sort of shaping politics, we need to understand them theoretically and analytically, we need to understand them as global phenomena, but we also need to understand how they are rooted in cultures and regions and how they are shaped by cultures and regions. So we're especially pleased to be hosting this book launch today because I think it really builds on those very principles. It is looking at a core value for us about how the lure of authoritarianism is impacting the future of democratization and what that means for global politics. But it is taking a lens of a region and what we can learn from the Maghreb and North Africa, how we understand the regional variation, not only as a phenomenon of a global shift, but also what we learn from those regional dynamics and how they can help link together to a broader global understanding. And I actually think our understanding of these topics are going to be best fueled by a core understanding of the regional dynamics. What are the unique features we're seeing at the regional level that are shaped by culture and history, economics, geography, demography, and politics? But also are inextricably interlinked with what we're seeing across other regions, and how this lure of authoritarianism, which I dare say for the first time we're even talking about this in our own country in the United States, it is relevant and we need to be understanding. So I really wish you great success in the conversation. I am so very pleased that you are bringing your knowledge, your engagement, and your deep understanding of the regional implications and dynamics of the Lure of Authoritarianism in North Africa to our campus. And I hope that helps contribute to our understanding of what are the risks, what are the threats to the values that we hold so dear and has been such an important part of the school. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you. I wish you a very, very successful day. Like Rochelle, this is the end of our semester, so it is the busiest time of year for us to engage in students. So many of our faculty and others who would benefit and be fascinated, I'm sure, by the conversation are going to be running back and forth to deal with our core commitment to our students. But it doesn't at all diminish our excitement about having you here on campus and our appreciation for what you're going to do here in your conversations today. So thank you very much. I hope you have a lovely day. Do get outside. It's going to be an absolutely gorgeous spring day as well on campus. So I hope you get a little bit of time for a breather as well. And thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Holman and Rochelle. My name is Stephen King, Associate Professor of government here at Georgetown. And I'm excited about this opportunity to have a long conversation about North Africa. Like Dean Holman, I agree that one of the strengths of Georgetown is the regional focus. We're also so rich in that area that we can have sub-regional focuses, such as North Africa. And the Maghreb or North Africa, I'm somewhat sensitive to it being overshadowed by the Maghreb. So it's also good to have an opportunity to look specifically at our challenges within the regions that may overlap, but not fully overlap with the Maghreb. And also, obviously, the importance of the moment given Algeria, Libya, and hopes for Tunisia and the challenges it continues to face. Now, I was very excited to get this opportunity. I should thank the Hassan AlAmin Foundation for Social Science Research for supporting this. And so my thought was, who do I want to do this? And what should we do with the project? I thought of, for survey work, we need to know, really, public opinion and survey work in the region in this critical time, and that's hard data to get. So we have Mark Tessler here, who I think is responsible for more survey work and polling and sophisticated analysis of this survey work statistically as anyone in the States, and plus his students that he's trained, including Lindsay Benstead, who's here today. And when I thought this topic needs some focus on gender, and unfortunately we weren't able to get it in time for the book, but we're happy to have someone who knows so much about gender at this moment. When I think of the economy in North Africa, the immediately who came to mind for me was Karen Pfeiffer. And a chance, and I wanted to hear her view of this economic context in North Africa that we're facing now. Obviously, it's very important for the lure of authoritarianism and the lure of democracy, how the economy fares. So I was happy to be able to get her. And Wan Hung as well. We know that part of the Arab Spring dynamics is that demography played a huge role. A young population, very high unemployment, and poor life opportunities for educated young people. So it's great to have her to discuss demographics. Religious extremism in North Africa, especially the religious extremist activities in our region, our sub-region, and Pierre Rousseau immediately came to mind. David Gorenstein-Ross came to mind as well, and we have both of them here, so I'm very pleased for that. The other point, the other thought that came to my mind was I want really good case studies of our countries, people who know the region well. And also I must confess that the combination of knowing the region academically as well as knowing it from your own life experience was important. And we have that great combination for our cases where you have debates, social science research done by people who are from the countries in several of our cases. So I immediately thought, who knows more about Moroccan politics than Abdeslam Maghraoui, so I invited him. And I'm glad he stepped into the project and became co-editor. He really took the bull by the horn, so to speak, and we should thank him also for doing the heavy lifting on framing the project. And being an agreeable person, so whenever we're into challenges, it takes a long time for something to be done. kept in the lane to this moment when we have the work to share with the world. When I think of Algeria, I think of Azzedine Layashi, and I want to know, he would know. He would know why it didn't have an Arab Spring until it did. Until it just did, or perhaps going in that direction. So I wanted to hear that. And whenever I think of Libya, I think of Ali Ahmida, and who can make sense of the anarchical situation to the extent in Libya. So I'm pleased to have him. And I hope my work on Tunisia lives up to their standards. So we'll see on that. In Mauritania, this is another point I often, I almost forgot Mauritania. And part of the benefit that they are part of the Maghreb Union. Part of what I'm proud about in this project is that we were able to include Mauritania. And because we have some of the few people who know a lot about Mauritania, it's not a lot of people who are really good and know the country well. So I'm proud that we were able to get Matt Bueller and Mehdi Ayari. All right. Next, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Hassan AlAmin is a research associate at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs at Harvard University, specializing in issues of comparative democratization. His foundation is currently overseeing 2 new research projects on the political economy of educational reform and the politics of governance and local development in the Arab world. Hassan was previously a board member. Hassan AlAmin was previously a board member of various research and advocacy organizations such as the Freedman Spugly Institute at Stanford University and the MENA Advisory Committee for Human Rights Watch. He has also served with the Carter Center and UN for overseas elections, monitoring, and peacekeeping missions. He has published in academic journals such as Politique Internationale, Le Débat, Pouvoir, Le Monde Diplomatique, and Journal of Democracy. He has contributed to periodicals such as the New York Times, Le Monde, La Nouvelle Observateur, El Pay, and El Quds. He holds degrees from Princeton and Stanford universities. His memoirs, Journal d'un Prince Banni, was published in 2014 and has since been translated into several languages. And also, I just want to add a thanks to Hassan AlAmin for finding this. Even though we call this the lure of authoritarianism, we know there's a lure of democracy and respect for human rights as well. And his work, his foundation, his own writing has always supported that. Democracy, respect for human rights, equal citizenship rights. And so I'm pleased that his belief in those things has helped us manage to start this project and end this project. Okay. Malaysia.
Thank you, Professor King, for those kind remarks. Thank you for everyone present here today. Thank you for Georgetown and to this beautiful center for incubating this important project. And after a long journey, finally we have a book. It is with us. I just got a copy from it. It is beautiful, and I'm sure it's very, very interesting. I'm enthusiastic to read it. This talk is labeled as a keynote, but in reality it is, please, I would like you to consider them as opening remarks. And I thought hard about them, and it took me a lot of time, many drafts, and finally I've decided to label them or call them From Exceptionalism to Singularity, the Maghrebi Experience in Contemporary Perspective. I know that today we will be deliberative It would be a deliberative day, a long day. So I do not want to burden you with excessive academic discussion. Above all, I would like to welcome you all here to this workshop, which represents the culmination of a rich intellectual journey. That journey, as Professor King just entailed, began in 2015, when he and Professor Hassan AlAmin and other interlocutors began to organize a conference to explore the contemporary politics of the Maghreb. The resulting endeavor in April 2016 brought together an impressive circle of scholars in a packed workshop here to engage the Maghreb's social, economic, and political currents. The contributors to this project have become now authors of a varied chapters which have now come to fruition, and I just said in that book. At the same time, I am deeply intimidated by the knowledge in this room. Many of you knew this area's empirical nuances and deep theoretical contours better than I do. So with that in mind, let me present just a single idea as a reflection upon our discussion. I present that idea not as an academic technician or expert, but as a private citizen, a Maghrebi citizen, a Moroccan citizen from a unique vantage point, as a scholar and witness who has watched this region evolve over the decades. There has long been an idea lurking in political circles and in political discourse within the Arab world, and even within academic circles, about Maghrebi exceptionalism. By exceptionalism, I mean the notion that North African states do not follow the general pattern of the Middle East or of other modernizing countries. Instead, the Maghreb countries evolve to their own pace due to their own cultural specificity, or at least this is how the argument goes. In the past, the argument for Maghreb exceptionalism has been leveraged, of course, as you know, by various actors in the service of anti-democratic projects. France invoked this belief as a justification for colonial rule. It would again exploit it in consequent decades by insisting that it was stability and order, not political transformation, that was craved and sought for by societies of North Africa. Let us not forget the quintessential declaration of former President Jacques Chirac, who a decade before the Arab Spring proclaimed in Tunis, in front of Tunisians, that Tunisians wanted bread and food, not freedom, not human rights. Such a statement came from the president of the birthplace for enlightenment. Ironically, many analysts reacted to Tunisian democratization by claiming that it was the country's exceptionally tolerant and liberal character that preordained it for political transition, predetermined the Jasmine Revolution. So it seems exceptionalism never dies. Likewise, during and after the Arab Spring, even as Tunisia underwent its revolutionary changes, the Moroccan and Algerian regimes insisted that they remain unique in their inherent resilience and durability in face of this regional turmoil. The Algerian version of exceptionalism has entailed a different set of considerations: that a centrally planned economy, geopolitically neutral stance, and espoused third worldism, born out of revolutionary origins, make the country an unlikely candidate for revolutionary turmoil. Exceptionalism in Morocco has rested upon the persistence of the monarchy. The royal regime is framed as an essential, mysterious, even Orientalist panacea to the needs of Moroccan society, which makes the country resistant to change. As another example, observers have sometimes suggested that Islam and Islamism in North Africa are exceptional in its moderate character and historical practice. This broader notion of Maghrebi exceptionalism may also partly stem from post-colonial discourse, which deeply permeated how generations of Westerners would look upon or sympathize within the struggles in the Arab world. It was in turn instrumentalized by certain French elites and their autocratic counterparts in the Maghreb. Yet now, nearly a decade after the Arab Spring, and as we see the latest wave of political changes occurring in Algeria, it has become clear that Maghrebi exceptionalism is an idea that needs recalibration. What I propose is that we see North Africa not as exceptional, but as singular. There is a Maghrebi singularity we can observe today, one defined not by its insularity from other Arab events or some immutable traits within these societies in the region, but rather by the way in which structural forces combine and recombine in a constant dynamic to shape the region. Indeed, the Maghreb is a microcosm of the Arab world. Herein lays its singularity. In the North African states alone, we can capture the dramatic cross-case variations that typify wider regime traits. We see both monarchism versus republicanism, democracy versus authoritarian rule, centralized political orders versus collapsing states, secularism versus Islamism, rentier economies versus resource-poor development. The list goes on, of course. Within this one sub-region, we have extraordinary diversity. Perhaps the only commonality shared by the Maghrebi states is language. Everyone else in the Arab world agrees that our different national dialects are equally unintelligible to all. There's much to unpack here at the nexus of Maghreb singularity. I would like to focus on just one aspect, namely the possibilities of democratic change at the macroanalytic level. Let me consider a subset of the Maghreb, namely Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, which are the countries I know intimately. In Tunisia, as we know, there is an electoral democracy that is in the process of consolidation as it struggles to establish institutionalized rule of law and horizontal accountability. Its democratization in 2011 was never supposed to happen, given the repeated claims of Maghrebi or Tunisian exceptionalism, as I just referred to, used and referred to by elites in its support to the Ben Ali regime. Much like the third wave of democracy, Tunisian democracy was conceived through pacts between competing political actors. In this case, those competing actors were Islamists and secularists. Divided by ideological discord, yet unable to conquer one another, Tunisia's Islamists and non-Islamist parties cooperated through coalition governments to lay the groundwork for its democratic transition, including the design of institutions, elections, and constitutionalism. This path was neither easy nor perfect. The bargains were fraught with tensions, as we all know, and nearly broke down several times, threatening the very transition. Moreover, economic struggles, transitional justice issues, deep corruptions, and issues centered around corruptions have burdened this transition. Still, Tunisia may well reveal that the most advantageous mode of democracy or political transition in the Middle East is pacted democracy. As such, it may be intellectually valuable and beneficial to re-engage the comparative study of these processes of these type of transitions. This has resulted in an extraordinary fact unmentioned in the Arab media. When Tunis hosted its 30th Arab League summit last month, it marked the first time that Arab League had ever met in a functional Arab democracy. Algeria today presents a different set of dynamics and considerations. We see from the events still unfolding, Algerians have been rebelling against two political constraints for years. The first, of course, is the ghost of the civil war in the 1990s and the long chilling effect its legacy has had on popular mobilization and political pluralism. In many ways, the uprisings today show the country is catching up to Morocco and Tunisia in terms of having its Arab Springs. More deeply, it is catching up to its own past by picking up where it left off in 1988, as it was the forerunner to all these revolts. The second constraint, of course, is militarized authoritarianism that has defined Algeria since independence, one where the armed forces ruled behind a facade of civilian rule. The Bouteflika era was a modest reconfiguration of these arrangements as the former president carved out a small realm of executive power by drawing up new business elite, incorporating him in the leadership and reshuffling the security services. In rejecting Bouteflika, however, and the wider autocratic system, Algerians also rejecting three forms of escapism that long shaped politics of the country. These were immigration to Europe, as we in the Maghreb in Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia would call the phenomenon of harig or haraga, the turn towards Islamism, or disconnecting altogether and living on the margins. Algerians term those who did the latter as Hittist, meaning those who lean upon the wall. What we see today is a reversal of these trends in which many citizens sought to exit politics and the political trauma through existential disengagement. This political moment marks Bouteflika's downfall today, but also the military's return. It is a transition, a political moment, but not necessarily a democratic one, as protesters continue to push against the state. In response, Algerian military is trying to learn from its arch nemesis, the Moroccan Makhzen. It is mirroring the Makhzen. Facing popular contestation, its reaction will be an attempt to recycle the system and make it perpetuate behind a civilian facade. This brings us to Morocco, where the Makhzen is also observing events in Algeria with apprehension. If the Algerian uprising results in genuine political transformation, it will find itself in an awkward position, as it will be alone clinging to a past order. Morocco's politics exudes different stereotypes of Maghrebi exceptionalism. Here, the monarchy and institutions have been justified or presented as pillars of Moroccan order, which are the result of impervious to revolutionary currents and democratic demands from below. This, as we know, is misleading. Morocco experienced wide-scale rioting in the 1960s, two military coups that failed but that have nearly deposed the monarchy, political mobilization in the 1980s, marked by riots in urban cities, and the 1990s, and during the Arab Spring, a new wave of grassroots protest. More recently, as society has been atomized, uprisings have become more localized. The Reef movement represents the latest example, as vibrant protesters there since 2016 reflect political anger, regional marginalization, and grassroots demands for dignity. On the one hand, the Moroccan state retains familiar tools for retaining power against political parties. It has long engaged in co-optation or else legal marginalization. Meanwhile, against Moroccan civil society, which has become the true vocal for political change, the state has become more intolerant. While it has not espoused a purely counter-revolutionary mentality, as many of its monarchical counterparts in the Gulf or Egypt, the regime has become more rigid and stiffer in its attitudes towards civic dissent. It has also deployed a new tool within the repertoire of control, namely leveraging the judiciary itself to silence its most ardent critics. The plight of many NGOs and social organizations such as Reef protest movements, press organizations like Freedom Now, cultural associations like Racine, this all now shows that the Moroccan Makhzen remain relentless in controlling dissenting options. On the other hand, Moroccan society is as resilient as the state. Its youth generations as well as civil society remain able to continually recalibrate their responses to pressures from above. They know that historically, the monarchy is not impervious to change. How can we interpret these changing tides that undermine the notion of Morocco exceptionalism? I would invoke two famous paradigms here by which social scientists have viewed political order in my country. The first is John Waterbury's theory of elite segmentation, which emphasizes how institutionally creating networks of dependency, segmentation, patronage, and clientelism has been a deliberate strategy by which the Maghzen keeps the political class under control. The second is Abdullah Hammoudi's theory of master and disciple, which suggests ancient cultural and religious foundations upon which Moroccans are expected to submit their obedience and authority to centers, power holders. Today, both optics need retweaking. Economic underdevelopment and pressures have meant that there is precious little patronage and resources left to fuel the segmentation of elites into networks of clientelistic dependency, and also that political institutions created to enshrine culture and religious obedience are unable to reproduce and sustain themselves in the face of massive popular pressure. In sum, the rules of political engagement in Morocco are shifting. These three vignettes of Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco show a common thread. Prior to the Arab Spring, they all had Jacobin-type states defined by a high degree of centralized authoritarianism. At the same time, they also allowed for very limited pluralism, which was exploited when necessary. Today, we see these old survival strategies as no longer working. Indeed, an intelligent question may not be so much if change is coming, but rather when and how, and what cost, at what cost, based on the Tunisian and Algerian experiences. My sense, rooted in Maghrebi singularity and its representation of wider Arab politics, is that democratization may come if it is pacted. Democracy will not come from above, it will only be pushed from below, but ultimately must be shaped by institutionalized through compromise between competing actors. There are many competing groups and forces with claims to power in the Maghreb. Some have been historically suppressed, while others have remained in power for decades. If there is a popular rupture, it will be up to these competitors and actors to forge a mutual understanding in order to create a shared political order and a path forward. If we see such positive changes catalyzed in this way, perhaps in some years, we will be talking not about Maghrebi exceptionalism or singularity, but rather Maghrebi leadership in the Arab world in terms of its democratic character. And that is a reality worth studying. Thank you, ladies.